Have you ever found yourself lost in an endless scroll of bad news, disasters, and outrage, and suddenly realized an hour has vanished from your day? Not feeling when you're simultaneously horrified by what you're seeing, yet somehow unable to look away? You're not alone. Today we're diving into something many of us experience but rarely discuss openly: doomscrolling, and how this modern habit is quietly eroding our mental well-being. The term might sound dramatic, but the behavior is something most of us recognize. That late-night ritual of thumbing through social media feeds filled with crisis after crisis, each headline more alarming than the rest. The pandemic normalized this behavior for many, but the truth is, doom scrolling existed long before then. We just didn't have a name for it. What makes this topic particularly fascinating isn't just the behavior itself, but how our brains have been essentially hijacked by algorithms designed to keep us engaged through negative emotional responses. By the end of our discussion today, you'll understand not only why your brain craves this destructive habit, but also the practical steps you can take to break free from it, including some counterintuitive approaches that most mental health discussions completely overlook. Let's start with understanding what's really happening in your brain during a doom scrolling session. Our brains evolved with something called a negativity bias. Essentially, we're hardwired to pay more attention to threats and dangers than to positive information. This made perfect sense thousands of years ago when being alert to threats meant survival. If our ancestors missed good news about abundant berries, that was unfortunate. If they missed news about a predator nearby, they might not survive to pass on their genes. Fast forward to today, and this same instinct that once protected us is being expertly exploited by content algorithms and news outlets. Each time you encounter a frightening headline, your brain releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These put you in a heightened state of alertness, which ironically makes you even more susceptible to seeking out additional threatening information. It becomes a physiological loop that's remarkably difficult to break. What makes doom scrolling particularly insidious is how it creates the illusion of taking action. When you consume news about a crisis, part of your brain registers this as doing something about the problem. You feel informed, aware, and somehow prepared. But in reality, most of what we consume is either beyond our sphere of influence or presented without actionable context. We're left with all the stress hormones, but none of the relief that comes from actually addressing a threat. The second key to understanding this behavior lies in how social media platforms have been meticulously engineered to keep us scrolling. These aren't neutral platforms, they're sophisticated psychological tools designed to maximize engagement, which often means maximizing emotional reactions. Studies have shown that content that evokes high-arousal negative emotions, outrage, fear, anxiety, generates more engagement than positive or neutral content. The algorithms learn this quickly and serve you more of what keeps you glued to the screen. Think about how you feel after 20 minutes of scrolling through disaster news versus 20 minutes of watching something uplifting. The former might leave you feeling drained, anxious, and oddly compelled to continue, while the latter often gives you a sense of completion and satisfaction. That's not coincidental, it's by design. Before we move on to the solutions, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that being informed is important. The goal isn't complete disconnection from world events. Rather, it's about establishing a healthier relationship with information consumption, one that actually serves your well-being and your ability to make a difference in areas that matter to you. If you're finding value in this discussion, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that notification bell. We tackle these nuanced topics about modern life and mental health regularly, always with practical solutions rather than just highlighting problems. Your subscription helps more people discover these conversations and build healthier relationships with technology and information. Now, let's talk about breaking free from the doom scrolling cycle. The first approach might surprise you. It's not about willpower. In fact, relying on willpower alone is one of the least effective strategies. Instead, focus on environment design. Our behavior is largely shaped by our environment, not our intentions. This means creating physical and digital spaces that make doom scrolling difficult and healthy alternatives easy. Start by auditing your phone's home screen. Which apps do you typically use for doom scrolling? Move them off your home screen, ideally into a folder on a secondary page. The simple act of adding friction, even just a few extra seconds of effort, can significantly reduce unconscious usage. Replace those prime home screen spots with apps that contribute positively to your life: meditation apps, photography, music, or reading. Next, consider a digital sunset routine. Our vulnerability to doomscrolling increases dramatically in the evening when our willpower is depleted and we're physically tired. Create a cutoff time, ideally at least an hour before bed, when news and social media apps are simply off limits. Many phones now have focus modes or downtime settings that can automatically limit access to certain apps after your chosen time. This isn't about restriction for its own sake. It's about recognizing when your brain is most vulnerable and providing it protection. The third strategy involves replacing the behavior rather than simply trying to stop it. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so does human behavior. If you regularly doom scroll for 30 minutes before bed, don't just try to stop. Consciously replace that time with an alternative activity that provides some of the same benefits without the drawbacks. This might be reading fiction, which research shows can reduce stress while still providing mental stimulation. It might be journaling, which gives you an outlet for processing emotions without the algorithm-driven intensity of social media. What often goes unaddressed in discussions about doom scrolling is how it connects to our sense of control and agency. Many of us turn to news consumption when we feel powerless or uncertain about the future. The paradox is that excessive news consumption actually increases those feelings rather than alleviating them. Breaking this cycle means finding ways to cultivate genuine agency in your life. This brings us to perhaps the most powerful antidote to doom scrolling: meaningful action. For every major issue that concerns you enough to scroll endlessly about it, identify one small, concrete action you can take that moves the needle, even slightly, in a positive direction. This might be a donation, volunteering, contacting elected officials, or simply having a thoughtful conversation with someone in your life about the issue. The key is that the action must be specific and achievable, not vague or overwhelming. When you take real action on issues that matter to you, something remarkable happens. That same part of your brain that was seeking the false sense of control through information consumption gets actual satisfaction from doing something tangible. This creates a positive feedback loop that can gradually replace the negative one. There's also tremendous power in setting boundaries around when and how you consume information. Consider designating specific times for news consumption, perhaps 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the evening, and be disciplined about sticking to these time frames. During these periods, prioritize sources that provide context and analysis rather than just alarming headlines and raw emotional triggers. Remember that our brains didn't evolve to process the suffering and crises of 8 billion people simultaneously. When we expose ourselves to global tragedies without breaks or boundaries, we're pushing our neurological systems beyond their design specifications. The resulting anxiety, helplessness, and compassion fatigue aren't character flaws. They're predictable outcomes of an unprecedented information environment meeting an ancient brain structure. One final technique that deserves mention is the practice of information fasting. Just as intermittent fasting gives your digestive system a break, regular breaks from news and social media give your nervous system time to reset. Try a 24-hour period, perhaps on a weekend, where you completely disconnect from news and social media. The first few times you attempt this, you'll likely notice significant anxiety and FOMO, fear of missing out. This is normal and actually reveals how dependent your system has become on the stimulation of constant information. With practice, these information fasts become easier and provide increasingly profound relief. To summarize what we've discussed today, doom scrolling isn't a modern quirk or simply a bad habit. It's the result of our evolved brain mechanisms colliding with algorithms specifically designed to capture and maintain our attention through negative emotional arousal. Breaking free requires understanding this dynamic and implementing structural changes to your information environment, rather than relying on willpower alone. What's your relationship with doom scrolling like? Have it changed over the past few years? I'd love to hear your experiences and what techniques have worked for you in the comments below. If you found value in today's discussion, please hit the like button. It helps others find this content who might be struggling with similar challenges. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to join our community of people working toward more intentional relationships with technology and information. Check the description below for additional resources on digital well-being and ways to support the channel. Until next time, remember that awareness is the first step toward change, and small, consistent actions create profound transformations over time.